You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and this is our closing episode for the year 2021. Oh, not to worry, we'll be back in January. But today's podcast is to pause and take notice that this has been a not-so-easy year. Not that the year preceding it and the year preceding that didn't present their own challenges, and not to cease for one split second being grateful that he who shall not be named is no longer President of the United States, although he does remain a present and constant threat to our democracy, apparently as does his party. But no, Robin, you don't want to go off on that again. Instead, today's episode is to simply admit that this has been a hell of a year, and not in a good way. From Delta and the new Omicron variants of COVID to the wrenching pullout from Afghanistan, from the spineless ceding of the Republican Party to QAnon, and from last January's insurrection to the Supreme Court decisions already showing themselves as fateful to women's reproductive freedom, yeah, a hell of a year. Now, while I haven't exactly been Pollyanna, optimistically cheering you on with a sort of buck up troops harangue, I haven't admitted the depth of my own periods of despair. They are real, and they're devastating. But the truth is, they change nothing. And if I don't somehow try to turn both my despair and yours into fuel for fighting back, then there's really just no comfort at all. So this week's program is about comfort. Maybe not yet comfort and joy, but at least comfort, which is no small thing. That means admitting our vulnerabilities and dark places and determining somehow to stagger back to our feet. So I'm going to fill today's episode with thoughts and readings about this season, with poems and with commentaries that range across different cultures and, tolerable belief systems, but also including among them aspects of Christmas per se that have to do with, comfort. So let's get started by going inside those headlines. The winter solstice falls on December 21st this year, but as always, it marks the shortest day of the year, when we will have just 8 hours and 46 minutes of daylight between sunrise and sunset. This solstice also marks the astronomical beginning of winter in the northern hemisphere, when Earth's North Pole is tilted farthest away from the sun. In the northern hemisphere, where I am right now, from that moment forward our days begin to lengthen, only a minute or two at first, but noticeably lighter as time goes on. What I always think of as the shimmer effect is the exact opposite taking place in the southern hemisphere, where the summer solstice, offering the longest day and the shortest night, is initiating summertime. Time itself seems to stand still, and also strangely to stretch itself elastically between the two. The word solstice, in fact, is derived from the Latin sol, for sun, and sistere, to stand still. Cultural histories are filled with mythical monsters of the winter solstice. For example, in Finnish mythology, it's told that Lohi, the witch goddess of the north, kidnapped the moon and the sun and held them captive inside a mountain, thus causing winter's darkness. That was Lohi. The Yupik peoples, who are indigenous to the Arctic, tell about the Kogukpak, the subterranean creatures who have bulbous bodies and frog-like legs and can only be killed by the sun. On winter solstice, they emerge and they hunt, and mammoth carcasses are said to be the corpses of those who stayed out too long and died when the sun returned. In Greek mythology, the Kallikanzaros, angry, hairy, little gnome-like creatures who live underground, they emerge too, and they try to cut down the tree of life. They can only be killed by sunlight, and they wreak havoc on homes and villages. But they're reputedly rather dumb, a little stupid, and they're unable to count past 3, so villagers put out colanders to ward them off. Why colanders? Well, the creatures end up trying to count the holes in the colanders until sunrise, and then they have to go back underground before they can cause any further mischief. Greeks have a great sense of humor. During the winter solstice, there are also stories about more benevolent beings, and a variety of deities were worshipped, like Tontantzin in Mexico, the great goddess Isis in Egypt, Ishtar or Astarte among the Hebrews and other Fertile Crescent peoples, Kalach Beru in Scotland, and Spider Grandmother or Turtle Grandmother by the Hopi and other Native Americans. The Scandinavian goddess Baiwi is associated with health and fertility, and she travels through the night sky in a chariot made of reindeer bones, along with her daughter, to bring back greenery on which the reindeer feed. In Italian folklore, La Befana flies around the world on her broom during the solstice, leaving candles and gifts to children, if the children are good. And there are many different versions of the Italian Tomte, who is also called the Nisa, and who is usually depicted as being no taller than 3 feet, with a long white beard and a pointy red wool hat, and who apparently is equally kind or sneaky, helpful or devious. In many stories, he takes up residence at a farm, but he only appears, of course, to the children. And he has a temper toward farmers who mistreat their livestock because he takes special care of farm animals. A bowl of porridge is often set out for the Tomte in order to stay on his good side. Because the solstice itself, as a scientific fact, is at the root of all winter festivals, when people came indoors to huddle and to pray for the return of the light, well, we find festivals all over the world for thousands of years. From the Hopi Indian celebrations of Soyal, through the Polish celebration of Godi, and from Greece's Brumalia to the Hindu celebration of Makar Sankranti. The Feast of Yule is a pagan Scandinavian festival, when it was believed that the Yule log had the magical effect of aiding the sun in shining more brightly, and it coincided with the Druidic and Wiccan festivals of Brigid, or bringing back the light, when girls and women wore garlands with tiny candles stood in them, and lots of mead was drunk. That makes me a little nervous for the flaming hair. In Pakistan, the festival of Chaumas was celebrated, during which people observed a ritual of baths as part of purification, in a 7-day celebration that included dancing, bonfires, a torchlight procession, and festive eating. Obviously, in the coldest and longest night of the year, people wanted to create life and light. The Dongzi festival is an extremely important one for Chinese and other East Asian peoples. Origins of this festival harken back to the yin and yang philosophy of balance and harmony in the cosmos, since all the forces, for once, are in perfect balance. The festival is a time for family gatherings. In southern China, they make and eat balls of glutinous rice, which symbolize reunion, and in northern China, dumplings are prepared and eaten, a tradition said to originate during the Han Dynasty, when Zhang Zhongjing ordered his apprentices to make dumplings with lamb to help poor children stay warm and keep their ears from getting chilblains. Not sure how the dumplings addressed the chilblains, but never mind. Saturnalia itself, which has given its name to wild celebrations and orgies around the globe, is an ancient Roman pagan festival honoring Saturn, god of agriculture and of time. All work and business came to a halt during the 7-day festival that began on December 17th. Schools and law courts were closed, the army rested, and no criminals were executed. Instead, Romans spent Saturnalia gambling, singing, playing music, feasting, and giving one another gifts. Interestingly, it was a time of role reversal, when Roman masters and paterfamilias feasted with the people they enslaved, who were given the freedom to do and say what they liked, well, ostensibly. In many households, a mock king was chosen, usually a lowlier member of the household, and it was a he, was crowned Saturnalicius Princeps, and it was always he who hid coins in cakes, and was responsible for making mischief, insulting guests, wearing crazy clothing, and having the title the Lord of Misrule, the idea being that he ruled over chaos rather than normal Roman strict order. Homes and temples were decorated during this time with boughs of laurel and evergreen trees, and lamps were kept burning to ward off dark spirits. Contemporary versions of the solstice, heavily influenced by Christianity and the 19th century in Europe, offer us St. Nicholas, transformed to Santa Claus, and a kind of merry old England via Dickens' A Christmas Carol, complete with snow, sleigh bells, ho-ho-hos, carols, and decorated trees indoors. Actually, climate change is now affecting snowfall. Indoor trees reflect their pagan origins, the strewing also of fresh branches to disguise the smell inside castles where horses and oxen would take shelter alongside people. And highly commercialized gift-giving prevails over whatever original motivation the solstice might have respected. Of course, in the southern hemisphere, rough winds really do shake the darling buds of May, but people go to the beach on Christmas. Natural phenomena, for example, eclipses, volcanic explosions, and solstices, surely must have awed and probably terrified early primitive peoples, just as, for that matter, pregnancy did, since men had no idea whatsoever why women, for some reason, made other people in their bodies, and men didn't know that men had anything to do with it. The stories and folk tales and carols, still observed today, can be understood in context and enjoyed as such. But fortunately, we have scientific reality, complete with its own inherent awe and wonder, to comfort us, if we take advantage of it. It's time for our first break, but don't go anywhere. Stay tuned, because there's lots more to come. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
If we're going to link together Christmas, Dickens, and Dorothy Parker, you just know that we are in the surrealism corner. You can credit or blame Charles Dickens. After the remarkable success of A Christmas Carol in 1843, he published 4 more novellas for Christmas before the end of the decade, thereby inventing the Christmas book as a genre of his own. In 1850, he began editing a new weekly magazine, Household Words, and taking a cue, perhaps, from the popularity of an 1848 Christmas supplement to the newspapers, he devoted all 24 pages of the December 21st issue to Christmas fare. Well, the sales, nonetheless, of that issue were so impressive that Dickens continued publishing a Christmas number as an extra issue, separate from the weekly one, for the next 17 years. The Christmas specials took on a life of their own, each selling more than 250,000 copies by the mid-1860s, well over twice the circulation of the magazine itself. Now, a Vanity Fair story by Dorothy Parker about the stories in Christmas magazines was published when she was still Dorothy Rothschild, and it was largely forgotten until recently when Kevin Fitzpatrick, a historian and the founding president of the Dorothy Parker Society, resurrected it on his blog a few years back. Her work for Vogue magazine was notoriously offbeat. She wrote many captions that had to be removed by the staff, such as, quote, "When she was good, she was very, very good, and when she was bad, she wore this divine nightdress of rose-colored mousseline de soie, trimmed with frothy Valenciennes lace," close quote. Another caption, quote, "From these foundations of the autumn wardrobe, one may learn that brevity is the soul of lingerie," close quote. That one actually made it past her censors into the pages of the magazine. As did, much to her editor's mortification, an infamous piece on interior desecration about an entirely fictitious tour of a house redecorated by a garish decorator. Quote, "No matter how anything began, it ended in a tassel," close quote. Well, by the winter of 1918, her editors agreed that she should migrate down the hall to work instead at Vanity Fair, the magazine that had already been publishing the bulk of her poetry and prose over the previous years anyway, including her story on Christmas stories. And here are excerpts from that Dorothy Parker story. The Christmas magazines and the inevitable story of the snowbound train. Every year I buy them, the Christmas magazines. Every year I say hopefully, perhaps this time. And every year I say wearily, never again. But I'll go on buying them, and I know it. Hope dies so hard within me. Somewhere, sometime, possibly here, possibly in heaven, I shall find a Christmas magazine without the story of the snowbound train. You know it, don't you? The lonely old millionaire who snorts at the mere mention of Christmas, and on the same train the little golden-haired child who is going to spend Christmas out at Grandma's in the country. You know how the snow piles up and the wires are blown down and the anxious train hand says there's no chance of going on? And then, don't you remember how the lonely old millionaire always sees the pathetic little stocking dangling out the berth occupied by the golden-haired child? So the LOM, lonely old man, who has perhaps made his millions as a conjurer, immediately produces an elaborately decorated Christmas tree and a seething mass of toys. Maybe it isn't conjuring. Perhaps all millionaires can do it. I don't know any regular millionaires, you see. I knew a man once who was supposed to be a millionaire and he couldn't even do card tricks. But then the reports of his income were probably exaggerated. According to the writers of snowbound train stories, this feat of producing Christmas trees from thin air is a very common one among millionaires. It seems to be a trait they share with actresses. For the snowbound train story sometimes has an actress in it instead of a lonely old millionaire, though he's first choice, I suppose on account of the child's future. If it's an actress, she's always a self-made blonde, a member of a traveling burlesque troupe, and unfailingly she has a little golden-haired child of her own, tucked away somewhere in the West. Sometimes, to make it harder, she has 2 little golden-haired children, but the story goes on just the same. Stocking, tree, toys, etc., etc. Now that's the story. If they have ever published a Christmas number of any magazine without it, it must have been before I was born. Words are powerless to convey the loathing which I have for that story. And the horrible part of it is that when I see the title, Christmas on the Train, or A Snowbound Santa Claus, or A Little Child Shall Lead Them, or any of the hideous titles under which it masquerades, I cannot drop the book and run. No, a morbid fascination makes me read every word of it. Perhaps I shall have my reward some day. Perhaps it will be my lot to discover the radical spirit who will give that child dark hair. The first page is always given up, to a highly decorated poem. You know the kind, one of those poems with medieval spelling. It is one of those hearty, good cheer things, and it usually contains frequent requests to let the welkin ring. Just what is a welkin, anyway? Then come the stories. The one about the burglar who the child thinks is Santa Claus, you know that one. Then the strong, red corpuscled one about the half-breed's Christmas, oh God, and the misery story that starts, she counted them again, 7 cents, 7 worn, thin, sweat-stained pennies, and tomorrow would be Christmas. Then there are the Christmas in the Trenches articles, and the masterpiece in Harper's, which is always called Christmas in Many Lands. Then the pages and pages of what to give. Oh, how I skipped those pages. That awful page headed Gifts for Her, with its scentless sachets and its timeless wristwatches. And always that page of jokes. Christmas chests, they're called, instead of the usual sense and nonsense or verse and worse. They are the customary little parlor anecdotes that you cannot remember even while you are presently reading them, made timely by the use of such phrases as, said Willie, passing his plate for more plum pudding, and Mother asked as she trimmed the tree. There is nothing on earth so serviceable as a joke. Later on, these same jests may be successfully used for the July issue by the simple method of changing the Christmas phrases to, said Willie as he stooped over the lighted firecracker, and Mother asked as she bandaged baby's eye. I bought all the Christmas numbers this year. Just at present I'm deep in the never again stage. Oh, is there no great public-spirited soul, no intrepid reformer working for the future of our species who will found a society for the suppression of Christmas issues? They are truly surreal. We have to take our final break here, but I'll be back in just a moment with some fighting words of comfort. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
3 male poets, 4 female poets, and a partridge in a pear tree. No fighting words of comfort. The first poem is by T.S. Eliot. The Journey of the Magi. A cold coming we had of it, Just the worst time of the year for a journey, and such a long journey. The ways deep and the weather sharp, the very dead of winter. And the camels galled, sore-footed, refractory, lying down in the melting snow. There were times we regretted the summer palaces on slopes, the terraces and the silken girls bringing sherbet. Then the camel men cursing and grumbling, and running away, and wanting their liquor and women, and the night fires going out, and the lack of shelters, and the cities hostile and the towns unfriendly, and the villages dirty and charging high prices. A hard time we had of it. At the end we preferred to travel all night, sleeping in snatches, with the voices singing in our ears, saying that this was all folly. Then at dawn we came down to a temperate valley, wet below the snow line, smelling of vegetation, with a running stream and a water-mill beating the darkness, and 3 trees on the low sky, and an old white horse galloped away in the meadow. Then we came to a tavern with vine leaves over the lintel, 6 hands at an open door dicing for pieces of silver, and feet kicking the empty wine-skins. But there was no information, and so we continued and arrived at evening, not a moment too soon, finding the place. It was, you may say, satisfactory. All this was a long time ago, I remember, and I would do it again, but set down this. Were we led all that way for birth or death? There was a birth, certainly. We had evidence, and no doubt. I had seen birth and death, but I had thought they were different. This birth was hard and bitter agony for us, like death, our death. We returned to our places, these kingdoms, but no longer at ease here, in the old dispensation, with an alien people clutching their gods. I should be glad of another death. And this is The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out, when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere, in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born? This Robert Frost poem is called An Old Man's Winter Night. All out of doors looked darkly in at him through the thin frost, almost in separate stars that gathers on the pane in empty rooms. What kept his eyes from giving back the gaze was the lamp tilted near them in his hand. What kept him from remembering what it was that brought him to that creaking room was age. He stood with barrels round him, at a loss. And having scared the cellar under him in clomping there, he scared it once again in clomping off, and scared the outer night, which has its sounds familiar like the roar of trees and crack of branches, common things, but nothing so like beating on a box. A light he was to no one but himself, where now he sat, concerned with he knew what, a quiet light, and then not even that. He consigned to the moon, such as she was, so late arising, to the broken moon, as better than the sun in any case, for such a charge, his snow upon the roof, his icicles along the wall to keep, and slept. The log that shifted with a jolt once in the stove disturbed him, and he shifted and eased his heavy breathing, but still slept. One aged man, one man, can't keep a house, a farm, a countryside. Or if he can, it's thus he does it, of a winter night. And this is by Toy Derricotte, her poem Christmas Eve, My Mother Dressing. My mother was not impressed with her beauty. Once a year she put it on like a costume, plaited her black hair, slick as corn silk, down past her hips in one rope-thick braid, turned it carefully, hand over hand, and fixed it at the nape of her neck, stiff and elegant as a crown, with tortoise pins, like huge insects, some belonging to her dead mother, some to my living grandmother. Sitting on the stool at the mirror, she applied a peachy foundation that seemed to hold her down, to trap her, as if we never would have noticed what flew among us, unless it was weighted and bound in its mask. Vaseline shined her eyebrows. Mascara blackened her lashes until they swept down like feathers. Her eyes deepened until they shone from far away. Now I remember her hands, her poor hands, which, even then, were old from scrubbing, whiter on the inside than they should have been, and hard, the first joints of her fingers, little fattened pads, the nails filed to sharp points like old-fashioned ink pens, painted a jolly color. Her hands stood next to her face and wanted to be put away, prayed for the scrub bucket and brush to make them useful. And as I write, I forget the years I watched her pull hairs like a witch from her chin, magnify every blotch as if acid were thrown from the inside. But once a year my mother rose in her white silk slip, not the slave of the house, the woman, took the ironed dress from the hanger, allowing me to stand on the bed so that my face looked directly into her face, and hold the garment away from her as she pulled it down. This is called The World by Jennifer Chang. One winter I lived north, alone and effortless, dreaming myself into the past. Perhaps I thought words could replenish privacy. Outside, a red bicycle froze into form, made the world falser in its white austerity. So much happens after harvest. The moon performing novelty, slaughter, snow. 1 hour the same as the next, I held my hands or held the snow. I was like sculpture, forgetting or perhaps remembering everything. Red wings in the snow, red thoughts ablaze in the war I was having with myself again. Everything I hate about the world I hate about myself, even now writing as if this were a law of nature. Say there were deer fleet in the snow, walking out the cold, and more ginkgos bare in the beggar's grove. Say I was not the only one who saw or heard the trees, their diffidence greater than my noise. Perhaps the future is a tiny flame I'll nick from a candle. First I'm burning, then numb. Why must every winter grow colder and more sure? This is from Ursula Le Guin's last book of poems called So Far So Good, Final Poems, 2014 to 2018. And it's called It Used to Be. It used to be the shine of streetlights on a rain-wet street was winter, and summer was outdoors and most of the time. A season's slant of light, noticed only in August on the golden knolls, the hint of ending to love that well. The moon was full and half and full and gone again, just as it pleased. Mostly the wind blew sweet in off the bay, but not the rare, dry, bare north wind, the earthquake wind. Sea fog, dear fog, came drifting in the Golden Gate sometime in the afternoon, and in the year, and was everywhere a while. The garden dripped in a grey hush. Then it was all gone. I am wise to the seasons now. I foretell an altered light, observe the solstice and the equinox, am eased by the majestic order. I am old, yet still, when fog from the river rises, silent and unforeseen, and the bright morning is all gone into the uncreated, I rejoice. And this last one, humbly, is from me. It's called Compass, and it's about the solstices and the shimmer, and some other things. Compass. There's a lost south in me, a place where joy, though costly, was a common middle name. Tomorrow there had elsewhere stayed today. Solstices changed places. Nothing was the same. There at the world's edge, the Antipodes, with all the stars and seasons rearranged, Earth's axis seemed to shift, and gravity's force drew me in. My latitudes since then have changed. A lost love, like a phantom limb, gestures emptily, making itself felt through pain. So ached this south in me for many years. But the world is round, and the lost self was regained. Once, seeking my own south, I ventured forth, in due course, with due diligence, due north. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's our show for this week. We'll be on hiatus the next few weeks, but we wish you a comfortable and comforting, restful holiday. And we'll see you in January. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan. And you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.